Welcome back to Everyone's Wyatt. I'm your host, Joellen Davidson, and this is episode 4 called Top Secret. Join me as we ride the rails through my great-grandfather Wyatt Teubert's adventures in railroad law enforcement. We'll also find out if he found his way back into the military and find more quirky connections he had to history. How does his family life fit into all this? You'll see. Buckle up and hold on tight because today's journey will not be a smooth one, but it will be a long one because this is a super packed double episode. If you haven't listened to the first 3 episodes, run back and catch up. We'll wait. I know I've lied before and said that, but this time really, we won't move an inch. For everyone else, here we go. I wonder if you mark the timing of milestones in your life the same way I do. For example, I associate different events, big and small, in my life to where I was living or working at that time. I know Wyatt's life story well enough that I do the same with his events. I mark his time in association with his marriages and careers, divided as eras in his life. His marriages line up nicely with his career shifts, actually. May was his military-era wife. Later in this episode, I'll introduce you to his railroad-era wife. And in a future episode, his legal-era wife. Knowing him this way for so many years is why I have always said he lived 3 lifetimes in 46 years. I could almost tell his 3 life stories independently, as if they happened to 3 different men. I feel attached to the eras of Wyatt's life, emotionally and, well, hereditarily. Which is also why I was so worried when the doctor said he had schizophrenia. Before we move forward in Wyatt's timeline, indulge me for a moment and imagine what would have happened if the doctor who observed him at the Naval Hospital had not reversed that schizophrenia diagnosis. In 1915, those afflicted with dementia praecox, which we now know as schizophrenia, were typically institutionalized and treated with insulin coma or electroconvulsive therapy. I say treated, but let's be honest, these treatments were experimental and usually rendered patients helpless and incoherent. So, if the dementia praecox diagnosis had stuck, my nanny and Morgan's charpaw would have never been born. I've been without my nanny now for almost 2 years, and I still find it hard to believe the sun still shines without her. So if I imagine that Wyatt's condition could have prevented Nanny from being born at all, well, there's just no way. I'm so thankful that the second doctor, who said those magic words that, while it ended Wyatt's military career, led to my opportunity to play tea party with Nanny, to pick honeysuckles in her backyard, to learn her secret to the best scrambled eggs, to get decades worth of the best advice a woman could receive, and to begin this full circle journey, bringing Wyatt back to life in a podcast. So if you have regrets or find yourself wishing you had turned left instead of right at some point in your life, imagine a little girl 3 generations from now who will get to be a mother and chase her dreams because of your decisions. I hope you can accept your choices as I wish Wyatt had. Don't make your great-grandchild spill your secrets to find redemption. Speaking of spilling secrets, that brings me to where we left off last time. It's the end of 1915. Wyatt and May now have 2 baby daughters, Thelma and Jean. And Wyatt just started a new career with B&O Railroad after his dismissal from the Navy. He quickly transitioned from gunner's mate Wyatt Teubert to Special Agent Wyatt Teubert as a member of the Railroad Police Force. At this period of time, these private law enforcement agents received very little training before being tasked with defending freight and passenger trains against crimes like theft and vandalism, often resulting in physical confrontation. Railroad special agents were employed by the railroad companies, not the federal government, but they were granted federal authority to enforce the law across state lines. They were often referred to as detectives or special officers. In fact, in tiny little railroad towns where there was no other police force, railroad special agents served as the authority in law enforcement while the train was in town. So, what we have is an authoritative position presented to a man who loved the idea of power and prestige and loved seeing his name in print. I dare say Wyatt Teubert may have found his dream job. And immediately he began to receive accolades for his performance.
On December 22, 1915, Wyatt E. Teubert, patrolman, discovered a defective condition in the track near 31st Street and reported it to the yardmaster. Mr. Tubert is commended for his meritorious act.
And 1916 kept him very busy with arrests.
October 17, 2016. 4 youngsters of Brooklyn, New York, were taken into custody this morning by Special Agent Tubert of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. Officer Tubert caught the boys in one of the railroad's buildings, endeavoring to pull out a gasoline speeding machine used by the linemen.
While Wyatt stayed busy on the railroad, he was keeping a close eye on what was going on with the U.S. Navy. You see, the Navy had established the Naval Reserve right before his dismissal. Unfortunately, at that time, Wyatt's medical discharge made him ineligible, as the Navy was only allowing actively enlisted men to transfer to the reserves. And then, probably just because Wyatt wished it, the U.S. Naval Reserve opened up enlistment requirements, allowing more men to join based on experience, trade, and area of operation. And guess what area of operation they were very interested in? Gunnery. That's right. So Wyatt headed back in for a medical evaluation. Did he still have epilepsy? Of course he did. But they didn't care, because they didn't want Wyatt maintaining ordnance on a ship or firing weapons at the enemy. Nope. Remember in episode 3 when I said Wyatt was determined to become an expert in gunnery? Well, he succeeded in that endeavor, and his military service was reactivated, but not as a gunner's mate as he was when he left the year before. No, now he would be chief gunner's mate and stationed at New Haven on the campus of Yale University. Wyatt would be teaching gunnery in Yale's Naval Reserve Officer Training Corps, or NROTC. He took leave from B&O Railroad while in good standing, fully expecting to return after his assignment at Yale. Immediately after being assigned as an instructor, there was an announcement in New Haven.
Gunner Tubert to lecture tonight. A lecture on ordnance, gunnery, and high explosives will be given tonight by Chief Gunner's Mate Tubert, drill instructor of the Naval Unit, in A1 Osborne at 6:45. Attendance is voluntary, but Admiral Chester expects every member of the Naval Unit to attend. This lecture is also open to any member of the ROTC. Gunner Tubert has served 8 years with the Atlantic Fleet and was a member of the gun crew which won for the Cummings the U.S. Navy Trophy of the Torpedo Flotilla in 1915. Such an opportunity as this should not be missed by any member of the Naval Unit or ROTC. The lecture is expected to last about an hour.
The training unit was expected to be just over 100 men in its initial year. But 1,000 volunteered, and nearly 500 of them were recruited. Classes were taught in a newly constructed training facility called Artillery Hall, located where Yale's Sterling Memorial Library stands today. If you're looking at YouTube now, what you're seeing is Wyatt's actual training unit, followed by a photo of the building positioned behind them as it looks today. The Navy was again making history at Yale by initiating the Naval Reserve Flying Corps, which also trained at Yale among the men Wyatt instructed in gunnery. One of the many places I'm visiting in 2026 is New Haven, specifically to tour Yale University on my way to Maine for vacation. I'm so excited to stand on the very floor where Wyatt stood to teach these men. I'll also be stopping by Woosley Hall to pay my respects at Memorial Hall, where I'll see the name of 227 Yale students who served and paid with their lives in World War I from 1914 to 1918. Some of those men were taught by Wyatt, and he was still teaching gunnery on the campus the year the memorial was dedicated. The next year, in 1917, Wyatt was published in Yale's Sheffield Monthly as he wrote an instructional guide called Telescoping Sights as Used in Great Gun Pointing by the Navy. The top of the first page, directly from that publication, is what's on your screen right now if you're on YouTube. Let's take a brief listen.
Previous to the construction of long-range guns with high muzzle velocity, the matter of gun pointing was given but slight consideration by naval experts. For the range of guns was such that accurate laying and the ability to receive
Yeah, you get the idea. Wyatt's article was 7 pages of technical gunnery jargon. He clearly loved what he was doing, especially in his prestigious position as an instructor. Since he left his family living in Baltimore while he was in New Haven, I can't imagine May was very happy. I found the address where Wyatt, May, and the girls lived that year, 1710 Harlem Avenue in Baltimore. A 3,200 square foot 3-story townhome on a basement. It's not in great condition now and was unsuccessfully listed for sale in both 2023 and 2024. Much of that neighborhood has since been demolished, but this townhome where Wyatt and May were raising their daughters still stands. In the bonus content of episode 3, I mentioned I was having trouble tracking down someone related to either Thelma or Jean, Wyatt's daughters. Remember, I had lost all the notes from an early conversation with that relative. Well, there's been a development on that front from an angle I had completely written off. A few months ago, I started begging Google to give me access to an old Gmail account I once used for a travel agency side gig I had. Accounts abandoned that long ago don't have a recovery mechanism like text me a code. Either you know the password or you're locked out. And I've been locked out for a really long time. I wasn't sure if there was anything in that email inbox or not, but no stone unturned, right? On Thanksgiving Day, 4 days after releasing episode 3, I received confirmation that Google verified my identity and they were letting me recover that email account. I couldn't open it up fast enough. First of all, guess what does not stop after you quit using an email account? Messages from Southwest Airlines. I must have had 10,000. And then I see it. Lou Vizzi. I knew that name. That's Jean's son. For reference, Lou would be Nanny's half-nephew and Wyatt's grandson. I thought I had remembered that most of our conversations were in a message board that I could no longer find. But when I opened the emails, I was very happy to know all of our conversations were from that Gmail account. And now I'm going to share the details with you. Jean left a grandparent book with her own written stories to provide a first-person account of her life. I remembered that such a book existed, but I did not remember Lou had given me Jean's words verbatim.
I don't remember my father. My mother divorced him when I was only 2 years old. He used to write to my sister and me. We answered, but I never saw him. He was in the Navy during the war. Then he later died. I never remember seeing my father's parents either. They lived in West Virginia, where we visited once when I was a baby. They never wrote or got in touch. The man my mother married after my father used to hit her, so we continued to live with my grandparents. Mother and her second husband went on to have 3 more children together, so there were 5 of us kids.
So, just a small correction to Jean's memory there. Wyatt did move out when she was 2-ish. I don't have an exact date, but she's close. Of course, Wyatt was never really home anyway, so it would be near impossible to pinpoint exactly when he truly stopped living with them. But in 1918, May and the girls moved in with May's parents. The divorce would come later. We'll get to that shortly.
Do you wish you could make a difference in the world, but think to yourself, I'm only one person, what can I do? Embracing Community is a nonprofit actively pooling together people just like you to help Kentuckians from Paducah to Pikeville and every town in between. Visit embracingcommunity.org to learn about 2 specific projects for which we desperately need donations to fund. Your donation could help heat the home of an elderly person on a fixed income this winter, or pay the tuition of a student in trade school, technical school, or other specialty education program. Embracing Community also monitors fundraising sites and social media for opportunities to reward Kentuckians who are out there trying to make the world a better place. We need your help to double our efforts in 2026. Please consider making a donation at embracingcommunity.org.
Lou's emails also included what he remembered his mother Jean saying over the years. He said that even though Wyatt had basically abandoned them so early in life, Jean grew up idolizing him, positioning him on the pedestal of a Navy hero. Lou guessed that since Jean's stepfather was abusive to May, Wyatt became the vision of an ideal father to her, absent or not. Since Wyatt hid the existence of Thelma and Jean as he moved on, I'm going to venture a guess that he was ashamed of his own absence more than he was just a jerk. I am, of course, speculating based on what I know of him, but now that I've refreshed my memory about the life May and the girls lived without Wyatt, I wonder how he would feel about it. Those emails I almost never saw again, those were from 2013, which led me to look up Lou Vizzi, Jean's son. Sadly, I learned that he passed away less than 3 years after my last communication with him. I really wish I would have known. And I wish he knew how much rereading his emails affects some of the other new information you'll learn in a future episode. I'll go ahead and tell you that at the end of this episode, you'll hear a dedication to Lou with some information about his life. You don't want to miss that. What an incredible man. And since I've gotten in the habit of telling you what I'm doing behind the scenes, you should know that I'm actively trying to make contact with his surviving wife so she can hear how the information they gave me made such a difference to me. Now back to the story. 1918 was also filled with mentions in the Yale Daily News, not only of Wyatt, but often by Wyatt, as he submitted his own writings to be included in the university's newspaper.
Gunner Tubert accepts colors on behalf of Naval Training Unit as General McNair reviews the NROTC.
Gunner Tubert congratulates Naval Unit on work and speaks highly of Admiral Chester and Professor Abbott.
Men, in the closing of the instructional year, I wish to congratulate each of you upon the splendid spirit shown by you in the manner in which you have taken up naval subjects taught you. And you may be assured that the training you have received here at Yale will be a tremendous asset to you during the summer.
Gunner Tubert is named head of the Department of Ordnance and Gunnery.
People who know me best are aware that one of my very favorite shows, I guess you'd call it my comfort show, is Gilmore Girls. I never dreamed I'd be referencing this show in my story of Wyatt, but here I am. While writing the segment you just heard, I couldn't help but think about Rory Gilmore writing for the Yale Daily News on the show. Even the library that holds Wyatt's former classroom is mentioned in the show. along with many details and facts about Yale University's campus. For example, since the 1800s, Yale has been home to several secret societies. The most well-known, infamous really, was called Skull and Bones, and it consisted mostly of undergraduate men who would be considered rising elites. Many of these secret societies, plus one fictional one, were mentioned in the show as well. Remembering this, I suddenly wondered what Skull and Bones was up to during the years Wyatt was on campus. Could I find another Wyatt Gump moment when he stood adjacent to an interesting event? Well, of course I could. First, I wanted to see how geographically adjacent Wyatt was to the Skull and Bones Secret Society. As it turns out, the Skull and Bones home base building on campus was located at 64 High Street. Wyatt's classroom was only 500 feet away from its entrance. That was a lot closer than I expected, so of course I had to dig deeper. While Wyatt was on campus 1916 to 1918, some of the members of Skull and Bones he would have seen on High Street were Howard Baldridge, future Nebraska State Representative; Kenneth Simpson, future member of the U.S. House of Representatives from New York; Robert Lovett, future U.S. Secretary of Defense; and, among many others, Charles Taft, son of recent U.S. President William Howard Taft, and the future mayor of Cincinnati. At least one of his students that I know of was also a member of Skull and Bones, F. Truby Davison. No relation to my Davidsons. He was a naval aviation trainee in the NROTC who went on to become the Assistant U.S. Secretary of War, later a New York State Representative, and after that, he was named Director of Personnel for the CIA. That list, with many, many more names during the entire history of Skull and Bones, can be found online, including on Wikipedia. In 1918, Wyatt's last year as an NROTC instructor at Yale, the Skull and Bones Society members allegedly removed a skull and other bones from a grave they allegedly exhumed without permission. Then they allegedly transported the remains from Oklahoma back to their little clubhouse next door to Wyatt's classroom, where they allegedly held on to it for decades. The Order of Skull and Bones stole a skull and some bones. Allegedly. One of those alleged young men in that heist was none other than Prescott Bush, who went on to become the U.S. Senator from Connecticut. He also went on to become father of George H.W. Bush, and of course grandfather of George W. Bush. I'm reading your mind now as you listen to this. Joe, grave robbing is bad, sure. But why is this significant enough to put in this story? Aren't you wondering why those remains? Who did the skull belong to? Thanks for asking. The deceased was a 14-year prisoner of war who had died 9 years prior in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. He had died of pneumonia after taking a fall at the age of 79. This man was named Geronimo. Is this a rumor? A tall tale of the Skull and Bones crew to bolster their reputation for hijinks and shenanigans? This allegation was serious enough that descendants of Geronimo filed a lawsuit against Skull and Bones, Yale University, and members of the U.S. government, including President Obama, demanding the return of the remains. Yale denied having the remains and does not own the building where the Skull and Bones organization was located. There have also been almost 1,000 members of the secret society since this time, so any one of them could have relocated the remains if this story is true. Members who were contacted as a part of the lawsuit simply didn't answer, and a federal judge dismissed the case in 2010 for lack of evidence. Oh, by the way, I found one report, and only one, that there were naval instructors from the NROTC associated with Skull and Bones. Whether all that is fact or hogwash, the Skull and Bones Society and the Geronimo mystery are tied to Wyatt at least by sheer alleged proximity to the legendary stories. And this is exactly how we end Wyatt's military era. We pick up as Wyatt transitions back from gunner's mate Tubert, gunnery instructor at Yale University's Naval Training Unit, to Special Agent Tubert, railroad law enforcement officer. This time, he's working for C&O Railroad in Hinton, West Virginia, about 60 miles from his hometown of Golly Bridge. Let's get some perspective about what's going on in the world around this time, shall we?
The World War is officially over, and our boys are coming home.
Death tolls rise as the Spanish flu pandemic continues to rage throughout the world.
While the Spanish flu ended up responsible for 25% of West Virginia's deaths that year, 1919 did bring celebration to the small town of Hinton. This thriving town was the center of coal and timberland of West Virginia, which made it a perfect hub for C&O Railroad. In fact, Hinton is famously known as Railroad City, specifically for this activity during that time. The town ended 1918 with a parade ending World War I, celebrating victory and the return of local military men to the U.S. Wyatt was welcomed with open arms to the town as military veteran and special agent. With Hinton growing and becoming a central hub for railroad transportation, it brought many newcomers to the area, those looking to relocate for work and those just passing through. The bustling little hub kept Wyatt very busy in his new job.
Special Agent Tubert, in charge at Hinton, arrested Rolly Reed for larceny of tobacco from a freight train yesterday. Officer Tubert expresses his intention of handling these cases in federal court, which makes larceny of this kind a very severe penalty. Evildoers can now look out.
The Lilly boys were assessed $50 each with 6 months' labor for gun toting. They were intercepted by Officer Tubert in the rail yard.
As busy as he was, this job of his was merely a distraction from what was going on in his personal life. Some months back, while still in New Haven, Wyatt had met a raven-haired young woman named Florence Stevens. At this point, he was no longer living with May, as she and the girls had gone back to her parents in Philadelphia. Finally, on July 29, 1919, it was announced that May was granted a divorce from Wyatt, making their split both public and legal. That's good, because Wyatt and Florence had welcomed a baby boy, Wyatt Evans Tubert Jr., just 8 days prior to that announcement of divorce. The baby was born on July 21st in Hinton, where Florence had moved with Wyatt as he started his new job. And the baby? He looked exactly like his daddy. Before I completely close out of the era of Wyatt's life with May in the military, I have to point out an ironic fact. One of the children May had in her second marriage, she named Florence. Just one of what seems like 4 million reasons all this took me 16 years to sort out. After Florence gave birth, Wyatt's mother, Ella Jane Hara, came down to see the baby. That was 106 years ago, so you may be asking how I can possibly know this. Well, that's one of the best things about my research and the reason I have 500 newspaper clippings. Not only are Wyatt's significant moments memorialized in print, but even simple times like a visit from his mama are in the newspapers. This is one example where the paper printed a simple visit by Mom at Wyatt's house. After seeing dozens of these in not just tiny newspapers like the Hinton Independent Herald, but also in larger publications like the Beckley Herald or the Charleston Gazette, I realized that either the paparazzi was tracking Wyatt's every move or something that makes a lot more sense. I believe that Wyatt loved seeing his name in print so much that he was calling in minor events in his life to the reporters. It fits with the nature of some of the words chosen, and even more, it fits with Wyatt's personality. I've talked about how driven he was, and I believe that started as a drive to achieve something beyond farming or mining like most men from his county. But once he started climbing and exceeding his own expectations, I honestly think he sort of became addicted to the attention. There's no doubt Wyatt had narcissistic tendencies. Knowing everything I know now, I can see clearly how his two priorities in life were to succeed and make sure everyone knew it, and also to impress his mother. And a baby boy was perhaps his greatest achievement in Ella's eyes so far. Meanwhile, in his railroad career, Wyatt was immersing himself not just in the enforcement of the law for C&O, but also in the justice system, as he heavily participated in the court cases that were stacking up after his many arrests. Then, on Halloween, with a 3-month-old baby at home, the evening edition of many newspapers arrived at homes across West Virginia. Back then, trick or treat as we know it today did not exist. The holiday was instead a day of widespread mischief, pranks, and shenanigans. For Wyatt, however, Halloween did not bring such things, but it did make him front-page news on all those evening editions.
Special Officer Tubert was shot this morning.
Special Agent Wyatt Teubert shot in the arm at Hinton Rail Yard by robbers.
Tubert's gun failed while he attempted to return fire as he was shot in the yard.
W.E. Tubert, well-known C&O officer, was painfully but not seriously wounded this morning by car robbers at Cotton Hill. He was struck in the muscular part of the arm, calf, and hip when he separated from the other officers while investigating an ongoing robbery. The robbers, 5 in number, opened fire upon Tubert at close range, and the wonder is how Mr. Tubert escaped as he did from most of the 20 shots that were fired. The robbers escaped to the hills, while the other officers attended to Tubert. The officer is recovering.
A posse of shooters seriously wounded Officer W.E. Teubert Friday morning. Amputation of one arm is necessary, physicians say.
As it turns out, no amputation was necessary. He had surgery and recovered for a couple months from the shooting. Upon recovery in December of 1919, Wyatt got straight back to work, defending the railroad and the town of Hinton, West Virginia against crime.
The arrest of Clyde Reed and Clyde Rookstool last night solves the 2 bold robberies committed here last week, when Dolan's 2nd Avenue store was robbed of several $100s and the C&O ticket office was broken into and $316 taken. Both arrests were made by W.E. Teubert, C&O Special Agent.
Wyatt rung in the new year of 1920 by participating in the prosecution of his own case, this time as victim.
The case of Charlie Jarrell was in court yesterday in Fayetteville. Jarrell will serve a sentence of 10 years at Moundsville for shooting and wounding Special Agent Wyatt Teubert at Cotton Hill last October. After the shooting, Jarrell had escaped into the dark and evaded arrest until December 8th when he was apprehended on C&O property again.
So maybe there weren't 5 shooters. That's unclear. The only article that reported 5 shooters also happened to mention Wyatt's muscular arm, his amazing feat of avoiding most of the 20 shots, and how painful the injury was. Sounds like a first-person account to me. I wonder if he called that one in. But now he can put that all behind him and move on to a drama-free 1920. right?
Sam Salmons, newly appointed officer under Chief Tubert, was killed today when struck by a train. He had just been hired and was arriving to town to start the job. Upon arriving at the station, Salmons stepped from one track to another off his train car and was struck by the number 4 train, causing instant death.
Florence spent most of 1920 pregnant, as she was now expecting their second child. Wyatt, you're about to have your 4th child with your second wife. You just recovered from multiple gunshot wounds. For the love of all that's good in the world, can you please stay out of the news for a few minutes?
Alice Rutherford of Green Sulphur was arrested Saturday after being found drunk and disorderly at the passenger station with empty pint bottles in his pocket and a small amount of peach brandy. A big robbery of boxcars occurred Monday when hundreds of dollars in meat, molasses, and other food goods was stolen. The robbers also stole 2 mules to help carry off the booty. A tip provided to CNO's Tubert and his officers ultimately got them caught. Officers Tubert and Eggleston ruined Christmas plans for 2 men when they discovered their still 50 gallons of mash, 2 gallons of moonshine, and a collection of bottles and labels ready for distribution.
There seem to be reports like this every other day, but I must interrupt this broadcast to add some happy news. Florence and Wyatt welcomed a daughter, their second child, on October 12, 1920. And then there were 4. The baby was named Florence Stevens Tubert, after her mother. Finally, Wyatt has his personal life in order with a growing happy family. Thank God the year is almost over. All things considered, especially when compared to the year before, 1920 wasn't bad and had much less drama. Uh-oh. With only a couple days left in the year, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Willie Green was shot December 29th about 1 o'clock and almost instantly killed by Officer Wyatt Teubert, who was trying to arrest him on Front Street. Mr. Tubert was going along Front Street, and as he was passing the shack where Eva Nichols' place is, she ran into the street and said that she had been shot. Tubert observed bleeding and what looked like a cut on her forehead as Nichols pointed to the distance behind Tubert, saying, "There's the man who shot me." Tubert made an effort to arrest the man, chasing him down and demanding the running man stop. When Green made an effort to get a revolver, Tubert shot him in the throat, killing him.
W.E. Tubert, CNO officer who shot and killed William Green here Wednesday, was given a hearing the same night and released after Justice Argabright said the officer shot in self-defense.
Okay, so that's not how we wanted to end 1920, but Wyatt's life story has very few dull moments. This just isn't the kind of press he enjoyed. He did, however, do his best to control the narrative. You've heard the news reports. Now I'll tell you the whole story and how he ended up on trial for murder. The train had just pulled into town that day. Wyatt got off and was walking through the main street of Hinton called Front Street because it fronts the train tracks and the New River. Wyatt would have been passing locals walking on the sidewalk and under the awning of various businesses when he approached a saloon owned by Eva Nichols, an African-American woman who also lived upstairs with her husband, Howard Curley. The doors burst open right in front of Wyatt, and Eva immediately saw him as she fell out of the doorway, appearing startled. Her knee-jerk reaction was to divert Wyatt's attention away from her saloon, as she was bleeding from a cut on the head, and even though Wyatt couldn't see the second wound, she was also bleeding from a gunshot wound to her lung. She pointed, as stated in the article, toward a man who was running across the street in the distance. Then she shouted, "He shot me." Wyatt, in uniform, sprung into action. The man he was chasing was William, known as Willie, Green, an African-American man who, as far as Wyatt was aware, had just tried to kill this woman before fleeing. In reality, Willie Green was actually an employee for one of the railroad's contractors and had also just arrived, as Wyatt did. Willie was later described as an inoffensive man and a good worker, who, when not on the railroad, lived in North Carolina. I mentioned before that these special agents for the railroad had very little training in actual law enforcement. I imagine the standard operating procedure manual read, "Don't let people break the law." Period. That's totally my opinion, but it feels true. So Willie Green is being chased by an officer with a gun, a white officer with a gun. He didn't have a gun or a clue what was going on, so he didn't stop. And according to his own report, Wyatt fired a single shot, killing Willie. I'm not even faulting Wyatt here, at least not completely. He was chasing a potential murderer who, as far as he knew, just shot a woman and still had the weapon he used for that shooting. If anybody is to blame here, it's Eva for causing the death of Willie while directing Wyatt toward him under false pretenses. Why did she do that? Well, because she was actually shot and cut by her husband, and she didn't want him in trouble. So before all this came to light, Wyatt was first let off the hook by a self-defense claim. Then multiple grand juries convened to assess the case. Wyatt was eventually indicted later that year for felony murder and released on a bail sum of $2,500, a fortune for that time. As it turns out, Wyatt fired 3 bullets, not 1. Medical examination showed Willie was struck 3 times, to the throat, the breast, and the side. It was also confirmed that he had no weapons on him, just a little over $2 cash in his pocket. Willie was only 25 years old. Eva recovered from the gunshot and knife wounds inflicted by her husband. Wyatt, pending trial, was promoted within C&O and relocated with his little family.
W.E. Tubert left Wednesday for Peru, Indiana, to take charge as C&O Special Officer with headquarters at that point, where he will have added responsibilities and a more remunerative position than here. He will be succeeded at Hinton by L.Y. Johnson of Ashland, Kentucky.
But as part of his pending trial, he did have to pop back over to Hinton from time to time, like when he needed to go take care of some business that you would have thought he handled when he first became a railroad police officer.
Notice is hereby given that the undersigned will apply to the Circuit Court of Summers County for a license to carry weapons, as provided in Section 7 of Chapter 148 of the Code of West Virginia. Undersigned, Wyatt E. Teubert, C&O Railroad.
Oopsie. Well, that fixes that. And just like with every move Wyatt makes, the newspapers in Hinton couldn't get enough of Wyatt's little visit.
Tubert here. W.E. Teubert of Peru, Indiana is here this week on business. Mr. Tubert was recently promoted to General Special Agent of the C&O Indiana. His territory is from Cincinnati to Chicago, and he has 17 men under his charge. Mr. Tubert is well liked here, where he was located for some time as Special Agent. He is a good and fearless officer.
If he does say so himself. I mean, come on, you know he called that in. In October of 1921, Peru newspapers caught wind of Wyatt's murder trial as they started reporting that he would soon be standing trial for killing Willie Green. And on October 22nd, witness testimony ended as the jury took control for 3 days before returning a not guilty verdict, ending Wyatt's time in the courtroom. For now. All this talk in Indiana of Wyatt killing a black man stirred up something I never imagined I'd be reporting as part of this story. But you'll hear all about my investigation into the Indiana Ku Klux Klan and so much more on the next episode of Everyone's Wyatt.
This episode is dedicated to Lou Vizzi, Wyatt's grandson from his family with May. According to his obituary, Lou attended seminary before deciding he was better suited for the Air Force. He served his country, completed college, and was hired by the FBI as a special agent, the same title held by his grandfather Wyatt, though in a completely different capacity. Lou investigated violent crimes, organized crime, and terrorism cases in Louisville, New York, and Philadelphia, often alongside his wife, who was also an FBI agent. Without Lou, this story wouldn't be complete, as he provided insight into Wyatt from Gene's perspective. For this and the life he led, we are thankful to Lou.
If you thought episode 4 was packed, just wait. There's more. Come with me to Indiana, where I dig into what I hoped and prayed was just a rumor, as I investigate the KKK, its members, and have to track down an obscure little publication that lit a fire under Wyatt. Among other things, we'll also uncover how Wyatt was killed in a train robbery before becoming an attorney. Did I mention he was a complicated man? I'm sure I must have. Join me next time for more adventures on Everyone's Wyatt, episode 5 called The Runner.
Everyone's Wyatt is a production of Moon Media. Researched, written, and edited by Joe Ellen Davidson. Music by Homer V. Sparks.